Hey guys, my name is Ricky Rivera with Spectrum K-9. This is Don Saputa with Forecast Securities Group, and today we decided that we would get together and chat with you guys a little bit about the Ninth Circuit opinion, Jones versus City of North Las Vegas.
Yeah, so what we know so far basically is that officers were responding to investigate a domestic violence call. And when they arrived, they were speaking with the female victim at the front of the house, and an officer on scene saw a man run out the back of the house and jump a fence. That obviously kicked off a search, so they started a perimeter and contained what sounded like several city blocks, or at least a city block, to try to contain the movement of this person. But that process, while they were doing that, it took about 18 minutes. And when they were doing that, the victim basically denied any of the domestic violence and claimed that no crime occurred. So, trying to apprehend this person, they started the deployment of a K-9 after about 18 minutes, and they hadn't seen the person since then, and they had no for sure knowledge of which yard he was in. But they essentially go to do a yard-to-yard search. They come up to a house where the dog shows some interest in odor in the high air, in like a high area. So, believing that the dog might have found the odor of the person, they go and try to make contact with the homeowners. And it sounds like they knock on the door. They try to get a hold of somebody, but to no avail. They couldn't get a hold of anybody because nobody was home. On the outside of the fence, they did see a "Beware of the Dog" sign, and there was a locked gate. So the canine handler initially climbs up over the wall to kind of take a peek and see what's in there, and he sees what looks like a chained dog kennel area, and there's three dog houses, and there's also some dog
Food
bowls and
bowls.
stuff. Yeah, so it makes him feel like, oh, there might be dogs here, but he doesn't see any dogs initially. So he climbs into the backyard, and then another officer hands him his dog over the wall, and that during that activity, these dogs that are in the backyard, the resident dogs, become alarmed and basically go on the attack. And so now this canine handler and the dog are under attack from three of these resident dogs, and the handler's trying to like build barricades with trash cans and kick the dogs away. But eventually, one of them runs off, but the other two continue the attack, and they start attacking the canine itself. And basically, he, in an effort to defend the dog, it sounds like he discharges his firearm and kills two of the dogs. All right, this obviously results in a claim, basically, for violation of the Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, which has worked its way up to the Ninth Circuit now.
What does this mean for canine handlers today in 2025, Don? Like, I understand that this opinion is saying that canine handlers should, or police officers in general, should have some sort of, I guess you can say, permission from the owner or a warrant of some sort. Does that mean that a canine handler should not enter a yard or search a group of yards without getting permission for each home? Is this something that you think may be overturned? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we always try to base everything in a level of reasonableness, right? In the United States, the Fourth Amendment, specifically a home, we always try to afford the most protection we can. There are a few exceptions to a search warrant requirement, which is typically required anytime we're going to do any kind of, entry or search into someone's private property. Some of those exceptions would be like hot pursuit, which is referenced here in this case, and we can get into a little bit. Another might be like an exigency, which is another type of exception where there's an immediate threat to life. Destruction of evidence could be one as well. But in a case like this, it all hinged around the exception that we typically refer to as like a hot pursuit exception, where we are in the immediate flight. There's an immediate flight and pursuit of someone we're trying to apprehend.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Do you think that well, let me put it this way. I think one thing that needs to change and would definitely help in this sort of situation is making sure that you as a canine handler ensure that there's a command post set up for a search that is kind of managing all these sort of situations and making sure that there is some sort of consent from homeowners if there's not that hot pursuit, I guess you can say, and when it's slowed down and a perimeter is set up, a command post needs to be set up, and that command post needs to take into account the consent, whether or not they're getting consent to search those houses, and kind of requesting other tools and those sort of things that can kind of help in this sort of situation. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe a drone or helicopter would help in these situations and how it could kind of uh, bring back alive that hot pursuit that the original chasing officer had?
Sure. So the hot pursuit exception basically is the immediate pursuit of a suspect, right? So we are on that person's heels, or we have firsthand knowledge. We're basically certain that this person is evading capture in the area where we want to go capture him. If we've had a long delay in time and we're not certain anymore, and it's been a long period of time, I would say that we would have to employ some other things to increase our legal foothold, barring consent or a search warrant. In this case, a drone equipped with FLIR, right, might give us a pretty defined hotspot if that person's in the backyard, where we could be able to articulate like, oh, we used a drone, and that is what indicated that this person's in this backyard. And depending on the crime, in this case, the crime was open for question. But, if you had a more serious crime, I think you could push the envelope a little bit more, right, on a public safety exception. If the guy's armed and dangerous and he's wanted and he's going to hurt some other people, or if he's doing home invasion robberies or something like that, you might be able to push a little bit in the public safety realm, saying that if we don't get this guy in custody, he could harm somebody. But I think we need to also take into account, when we're making these decisions about an incursion into somebody's private space, we need to be considerate of what level of reasonableness we're operating in. And I know that's hard to do sometimes when things are dynamic and they're rolling. But it sounds like, in this case, not to say that these guys did anything wrong, but 20 minutes is quite a while. That if you are you pretty certain that you have good containment, there's nothing wrong with slowing this thing down and using a drone, using a helicopter if that's an available resource, or an airplane. Placing some phone calls, maybe doing some K-9 announcements, for a longer duration over a PA, that kind of thing, before we start forcefully entering. And it's a little unclear how intensely they tried to contact these people, but in most places you can try to get maybe a reverse 911, or track this person down through an open source intelligence database and get a hold of the cell phone number and see if you can at least get a hold of the residents. I would say, given the circumstances, something like that where the yard is locked, we're pretty certain there's dogs in the backyard. That would be one that, we might have to just risk. If we're going to do it, we might have to risk doing it ourselves, or doing it with a drone or some other tool, as opposed to bringing the dog in, because the dog adds a variable that it's hard to control, right? When we have several pack animals now, even the best dogs are going to try to defend themselves, and that's going to create a little chaos, I think.
Yeah, I think that brings a good point too. I think a lot of people see this and they're like, oh, or hear this, and they immediately think, oh, we're gonna have to go up and knock at every single door prior to us searching with the dog, or just searching in general. I think it's important as a police officer in 2025 to think outside the box, and like you said, a reverse 911, going through history in your databases and seeing if there's a phone number to that household where you can get a hold of somebody, something other than having to go up and physically knock on the door, which I think to you and I sounds like, oh, that's really simple. Who wouldn't do that? But I think a lot of people don't think outside the box and don't think about that as a possibility. And like I said earlier, I think as a canine handler, it's very important. Your job in that moment is to focus on the dog and the actual search and play. I think it's important that you have someone trustworthy, like a sergeant or a corporal or an agent, if your department has that sort of position, that is back at the command post and has all these things logged and is doing all of that work for you, and has a specific set list of questions that they can call and ask the homeowner or the business owner, property owner, whatever it is, that may help you out in your canine search too. Hey, do you have pools? Hey, is your fence secure? Hey, is there dogs on the property? Hey, should anybody be on the property? Does anybody else other than you have access to this property? Is there anybody allowed to be on the property right now? And hey, if we find the suspect on the property, are you looking? would you be open to pressing charges, or do you want to press charges? Those are questions
Right.
that the person that's contacting the homeowner, property owner, responsible, whatever it's called, or whatever you call it, can be gathering that information for you. And I don't think that that should be on you, the canine handler, to do that. I think that should be on someone at the command post that is legitimately logging this out and calling each individual property or person themselves and doing that work for you. And I think that would kind of get the flow going a lot better than what people are thinking is like, oh, I need to stop after each yard and go up and knock on the door. Like, no, somebody can do this ahead of time for you. Obviously, this is in the situation that you don't have a hotspot from a helicopter, drone, whatever it is, helping you out. What do you have to add to that, Don?
Yeah, I think what we're kind of touching on is, getting into the policy and training territory, which I think is at issue here. Like I said, I don't think that these guys necessarily did anything wrong. There are places where that is still standard practice. But the reality is, as these decisions come out, it's our job as trainers and, people that have investment in the industry to try and help departments shape policy and help shape training in a way that helps people with tools to make these decisions quicker in the field, right? Like, so an example of that would be, if the policy has a standard practice for a surrounding call out like this, where we have a person's run into a backyard. Okay, well, we establish containment. Okay, well, once we're certain containment set, all right, maybe we're going to call out a drone. If that's not available, then at the very least, maybe we're going to assign a command post, right? And we're going to assign this checklist where people are going to start going, okay, I need someone to start making phone calls to all these houses, right? I need someone to start doing reverse 911. We need to send a contact team ahead of our search team to go and knock on the door, get permission, ask those questions, right? Pools, pets, etc. Right? I mean, in a sense, I don't think this case will be overturned. I could see it going up the chain, but I don't think, typically the Ninth Circuit is pretty extreme. We all know that, but I think in this case, it's not an unreasonable expectation for a homeowner to be able to leave their dogs out in their own backyard, especially when they've done the due diligence to secure it with
Absolutely.
a locking gate, and they secured it with a sign that says, beware of dog. They've done, as a homeowner there, I don't think there's any indication that the homeowner was negligent about the fact that these dogs were loose in the backyard and that the dogs are potentially, going to be aggressive to somebody in the backyard. So I think it's pretty unrealistic for us as police officers to think that people are going to be completely okay with us shooting and killing their dogs in the event that we're illegally trespassing in their backyard, right? And again, at the issue of this case is the duration of that hot pursuit. At the moment where they're going in there, barring the, I guess, indication from the dog had showed some interest in odor in that area. But barring that, there was no definitive evidence that this guy was in the backyard. And, concluding the search, they actually did not locate this person. So, to me, I think most officers, we need to be honest with ourselves and reasonable that isn't really hot pursuit. And the court said that. And I think if it were to go to the Supreme Court, I don't think that the Supreme Court, even as conservative as it is, would disagree that 20 minutes without a sighting of this guy is still hot pursuit. I think most people would agree that window has closed, and now we need to be operating in some other legal framework other than hot pursuit.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, looking at this from the canine handler, canine trainer perspective, it's very important. Canine handlers, at the end of the day, when a perimeter is set up and there's a high chance there's a body inside, you're probably going to be the number one tool the department looks at to deal with this sort of situation. And it's very important that you have a clear understanding of this case law as it is right now. And I think that it's very important that you take the steps to train your patrol teams, train your sergeants. Hey, I cannot use my dog to search, and honestly, they shouldn't even be searching without taking this into consideration. Do your due diligence. Like Don said, set up a command post, get all that, get someone making all these phone calls and starting to get consent to search these properties if you already don't have something helping you out, like a drone or a helicopter that's going to give you a hotspot and help you recreate that hot pursuit or kick back that hot pursuit. And I think it's very important that you train whoever is making those phone calls to ask questions that are going to help you out as a canine handler, anyways. Give you information as a canine handler to help you to help make that search easier, and you have more knowledge of what's going on. Things as simple as that person making that call, that person making that call to the homeowner or property owner, being like, hey, can you check your cameras from this time to this time and let me know if you saw anybody in your yard. Things like that are going to be pieces of information that are going to help you a ton as a canine handler, and help you, continue searching with your dog within the means of current case law, especially here in the Ninth Circuit.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things where I think we just need to be, the consummate professionals that we're striving to be. I think we need to review case law. I think, they give us new parameters to work in. As you know, there's been some recent changes with other portions of canine case law, and I think that stuff doesn't ruin the game or change it to where we can't deploy dogs. I think we just need to be intelligent and think inside the framework that they give us. And in this case, I don't, I think it's an important distinction, but I don't think it changes very much. I mean, if we have fresh pursuit and we're right on someone's heels, the dog is still available. We can still put that dog in the backyard. What they're asking us to do is this basically transition from a fresh pursuit to more of a surrounding call out type of scenario, and that is where we need to slow things down. Whether it's a house, whether it's a backyard or whatever, we got to slow down and start to evaluate what other options we have. And that doesn't take the dog out of play, but it just makes the dog something that we have to be a little bit more intelligent about how and when we're going to deploy it.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up here, one story that I want to put out there to the canine handlers, that I think is important. Um, in the situation that you call a homeowner within a perimeter for something that you're searching, you call that homeowner and you're like, hey, there's possibly a suspect in your backyard. Do we have consent to search that backyard with our police dog to look for this person? And that homeowner's like, yeah, absolutely. You can go and search it. And you ask them, hey, do you happen to have dogs, or is anybody in the yard that shouldn't be back there? And they're like, yeah, I got my dogs back there. It's probably a good idea for you to be like, okay, well, we're going to send an officer to your front door, let them in, and they are going to go to your back door to let those dogs in with you. Because what you don't want is to tell a homeowner like, hey, yeah, go let your dogs in from the backyard. A suspect's back there as well. They open their back door to let their dogs in, and boom, now we have a suspect coming into a homeowner's backyard as well. So keep that in mind when you're trying to render a yard safe for your canine. Is if there's a suspect back there and the door opens, there's a chance that they're going to try to get in there too. So that's super super important. Just something to add. But
yeah, we want to be careful about that. That would be an example potentially of like state-sponsored danger, where we're putting that person, we're making them an agent of ours, and we're asking them to do things that put them in danger. And that could also incur quite a bit of liability. So definitely would want to try to handle that as much as possible. But anything else that you want to add before we hang up?
No, I think that's good. I think hopefully this helps at least one canine handler out, and I think that this information is very beneficial. It's fresh, and it's the talk of town, the talk of our training groups right now. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat a little bit and put out this good information to everybody out there. If you already don't, give Don a follow on Instagram at Forecast Security Group. He is constantly putting out case law information, especially in regards to canine stuff. As you can see, we're both wearing our van shirt. My name is Ricky with Spectrum Canine. Don and I and my partner Steve have together built a really great course, including canines and detectives and surveillance and a lot of cool stuff. So take a look at our Instagram, Spectrum Canine, Don with Forecast Securities Group, and thanks
again, guys, and we'll see you next time.